As he and I were talking, and he was asking about preparing for today's presentation, and I know Mike through his work in the community, and our sons were at Central together at one point, and he's always at the East Catholic School auction, helping to raise money for that great cause as well, and all of us know him from WTAE. But as we were talking over the phone and just kind of getting to know each other a little bit better this past week, it really struck me that here's a man of deep faith, and a man who is really, really focused on hope. You know, as Father Scott Seataller always reminds us in all the various sessions that he does for us, that we have a very sacred duty as Vincentians to spread hope in a world that is desperately in need of good news and in need of good stories. And everyone sitting around the table here probably has, dozens of stories they could share about people that have touched your lives in your home visits, and maybe lives that you've touched through your work as Vincentians. And it's our job to share that message of hope to a world that's in so desperate need of hope today. So as Mike and I talked, it just blew me away that here's a man of hope. And, he's covered 3 popes, all kinds of different things throughout the diocese here, and is a man, as I said, of great faith and great hope. So please, warm welcome to Mike Clark.
Thank you so much, Deacon Keith. It's an honor to be here today. I was sitting next to Father Scott, and when Keith said, we really want to bring a dynamic, exciting speaker, Father Scott said, yeah, it's too bad he couldn't make it, so that's why I'm here. He's my sidekick. But it kind of reminds me of the story. How many of you remember the Latin Mass, just so I show of hands? Well, there was a story back in the 1960s. There was an Italian man who lived in Rome. His name was Dominic. Dominic was not really filled with faith. He was not Catholic, but he always felt a calling to come to America, to become an American. Anyone hear the story about Dominic before? Well, Dominic, finally, he exhausted all possibilities. He never could come to America, never got the okay to come here. So someone said to him, maybe you should pray. We Catholics pray, so maybe we should pray. So he got down on his knees, and he said, Father, if you send me to America, I will serve the church. I want to be an American. The next day, he gets the notice he's coming to America. So he gets off the boat, and he runs to the first church he sees in New York, and the procession was just about to begin. This was the Latin Mass back in the 60s, and the priest said, sure, you can help us out. Why don't you be an usher? And he goes, usher, what's this? What's the usher? What's this? So he said, when I give you the signal, you take up the collection, okay? He goes, how will I know, Father? How will I know? He said, you'll know. So during the Mass goes on beautifully. After Mass, the priest comes into the sacristy, and he sees a huge pile of money. More money than he's ever seen on Easter and Christmas combined. And he goes to Dominic, and Dominic's standing there very proudly, big Italian man, serving his church. He said, Dominic, what did you do? And he goes, well, Father, every time you give me the signal, I take up the collection. I said, Dominic, there's one time. I said, one time. He goes, no. Every time you say, Dominic, go frisk him, I go frisk him. Thank you for all the Latin scholars out there. I'm running out of places I can tell that joke. You know that. But humor is such a big part of Father Scott's ministry. We have to laugh. It makes us feel good. It brings us closer together. And I know as Vincentians, you encounter people and you use humor often when you're meeting people, sometimes in the worst moments of their lives. So when Keith asked me to come and speak, it reminded me of the very first time I was asked to speak as a Channel 4 anchorman. Sister Matthias from St. Maurice's Parish in Forest Hills asked me to come to speak to her first grade class on Celebrity Reading Week. Some of you may have heard this story before, but she kind of Catholic guilted me into coming. She wrote on a piece of paper all the great athletes from Pittsburgh would come to her first grade class for Celebrity Reading Week. And on the bottom she wrote, Mike Clark, WTAE. So I was doing the morning and noon news at the time. And the day I was supposed to read to her first graders, I came right over from the set, and I'm smiling, and she didn't give me a great introduction like Deacon Keith. She just looked at me in the hallway and went like this. And those of you who knew Sister Matthias, she was all business. She was just a great teacher, but she was all business. And she said, class, do you know who this next celebrity reader is? And her first grade class just looked at me like this. I was brand new to Pittsburgh, and I'm smiling. And just then a little boy in the back of the room said, oh, sister, I know who it is. So she said, Corey, stand up and tell the class who it is. And he looked at me and he said, I know you, you're Dan Marino. And I said, yes, I am. And everyone got my autograph that day. But since I've become a Pittsburgh Catholic 21 years ago, it's stories like that that really just have uplifted me. And I just want to share a couple of stories with you today as we get closer to the message of humor, hope, and healing. So I was interviewing then Bishop, now Cardinal Worrell, for a story in my first couple of years here. And Father Langland, everyone knows Father Langland, after the interview with Cardinal Worrell, Father Langland said, Michael, I have someone to meet you, a fan of yours is here in the building. So I said, sure, I have time to meet this fan, and I don't know who it was going to be. He opens the door, and it's Bishop Zubik. And Bishop Zubik, I think, was just in his first year as an auxiliary bishop back then, in the late 90s. And he said, hey, Mike, how you doing? I love you and Michelle Wright. I watch you and Michelle Wright on Channel 4. So I knew Bishop Zubik was intelligent. So I said, Bishop Zubik, I remember reading your name. You're from Beaver County, right? He said, how do you know that? He said, you're not from here, right? I said, no, but I remember reading your name, and I had to ask your name, and someone knew you from Ambridge, right? He said, yes. He said, oh, we have a videotape of your coverage of me being installed as auxiliary bishop. And he had a smile on his face, and I knew there was a story. I don't know if he's ever told you the story. It's true, but if you look at the air check that day, he said all of his friends videotaped that day because he was going to be on the news. When we said, coming up next on Pittsburgh's Action News, you'll meet the new auxiliary bishop of Pittsburgh, instead of seeing the video of Cardinal Worrell and Bishop Zubik embracing one another, they accidentally hit the wrong button. And when we said, you'll meet the new bishop, it was the Sports Illustrated edition of the swimsuit issue. So you saw a woman in seaweed on the beach. I don't know why, despite all of that, Bishop Zubik and I have become friends. He is just a great man of faith. I always saw him behind the scenes as auxiliary bishop. I didn't really know what auxiliary bishops do other than confirmation or different offices within the diocese, but I saw him pretty much in meetings and in the background. And one day he came over our house. We moved into a new house in Forest Hills, and he never met my family before, but he was in the area saying Mass, and he wanted to bless the house. So here we are in our kitchen, my wife and 4 children. They were super, super young. And Bishop Zubik, we all embraced. He closed his eyes, and he had this beautiful extemporaneous prayer. And he talked about my wife and each child in order of their birth. I don't know how he did it. I think I only mentioned them once to him. But it was so beautiful. I looked down, and my son Matthew at the time, he was like 3 or 4 years old, he was looking up at Bishop Zubik with a big smile on his face. So that night, I was tucking him into bed, and Matthew said, Dad, you know how cool that was, having Bishop Zubik here? I said, it was pretty cool. I said, what was the coolest thing about it? He said, he was talking to God in our kitchen. And I said, yes, and God was listening. And Matthew was like, man, that was the coolest thing for this little guy. He goes to kindergarten, and at St. Maurice, we had this great tradition of a kindergarten tea party. You got to ask one adult in your life to come to the kindergarten tea party. It couldn't be your parent, and all, my family, my wife's family is all in New York. So I was wondering who Matthew wanted to invite. We get a call from his kindergarten teacher, and she said, do you know that Matthew invited Bishop David A. Zubik to the I said, no, he doesn't know it either. So I called him up, and he said, I'll be in Harrisburg at a meeting. I can't come to that, but I'll visit the school before the end of the year. Sure enough, true to form, Bishop Zubik comes, and it was awesome. He brought his big bishop's hat, and he brought newly minted coins, and the kids were like sniffing it and trying to taste it because they wanted to know if the coins tasted like mint. But it was such an extraordinary meeting that it really impacted the kids. So much so that later that night, I'm at work at Channel 4, and I get a call from a friend of mine. He's laughing on the other end. He said, I got home from work today, and his son, who goes to school with Matthew, ran up to the car and said, Dad, you're not going to believe who visited today. And he said, who? And he said, well, Matthew Clark knows people, and the Pope visited us today. It wasn't much longer than Bishop Zubik was shipped to Green Bay, so I don't know what to do with it. Bishop Zubik asked me to do something really special for him when he celebrated his 25th year as a priest. He was celebrating Mass at Holy Angels in Hayes. How many of you have been to Holy Angels in Hayes? Would be a great fish fry too. But it's a beautiful little church, and much like today, the lectors stayed on the altar, and I had a bird's eye view of Bishop Zubik. I'd never been to a mass where he celebrated before. And he, just like today, he walked down in the congregation and he talked directly to the people. And he, again, my image of him was in the back, someone in the background doing paperwork and administrative work. It was the first time I saw him preach, and you know what I didn't know back then, but what a dynamic speaker he is, how full of life he is, how much he loves Christ. And he was almost dancing in the aisles, but how he tied the present day situation to the gospel message of yesteryear was beautiful. And I'll never forget it because it was the gospel message of the woman who gave all she had. And he tied it into the Murrah building in Oklahoma City when it was destroyed by terrorists. And there was a woman living in Oklahoma City who watched the images on the news. She wanted to give something. She wanted to do something. But she had nothing. She lived her life in a wheelchair. That's how she got around for mobility. And she went down to the scene, and she cried and she prayed. She wanted to do something. And Bishop Zubik told her story as part of his homily, who said, I got to do something for these people. And she saw all the people from all across the country who came and volunteered through the Red Cross and the rescue crews who were doing it all, and they were filthy dirty trying to, help with the rescue. And she said, you know what? I don't have any money, but I have a clothes washer at home, a washer and dryer. So every day she came down with a big bag, collected all of the workers' clothing, filled with dirt, and she washed them every night. She folded them and she brought them back. She gave it all. And as Bishop Zubik is telling this incredible story, he encouraged all of us, wherever we are in life. And I saw all the faces of the people living in Hayes, a direct view of them. And some were crying, some were hugging one another. His words deeply affected these people. And I can't help to think that there were some Vincentians out there in the crowd who knew what service meant, who knew what giving to the poor meant. And it was something that was so spectacular that it gave me the first glimpse of Bishop Zubik. He talks a lot now of being excited about our faith. He talks a lot about now living the church alive. But this was long, long before he ever uttered those kinds of words in Pittsburgh. And it gave me a glimpse into him. I wish he was here to hear these stories. But there was a story of Bishop Zubik back when he was a rookie priest at Sacred Heart. And has anyone ever heard this story before? He was a rookie priest, and on Mondays, the parochial vicar and the pastor gave him the responsibility of taking care of things. And he said that was his big night. He was on duty. And it was a terribly busy day that day, this one particular Monday. As you know, Bishop Zubik is a big news hound. He loves news. And he waited for his news week to come, and before the Monday night novena mass, he was just going to run over to McDonald's, have his Big Mac, and read his Newsweek magazine for the only hour he had to himself that day. It was a particularly busy, hectic day, and he was looking forward to it. And he went over to McDonald's and sat down. He just wanted some peace. He was approached by a woman with her tray and her little girl, and she said to Bishop Zubik, Father, can I sit here with you? And he wanted to say, look, I've had a heck of a day. Please, some other time. That was in his heart. He wanted to say this. But he looked into her eyes and he said, there was something about her that he wanted to have her sit down with him. It was a fabulous conversation. He pushed the Newsweek aside. He said the hour went very fast. He looked at his watch and he had to go to Mass. And he said to her, God loves you. Thank you for sharing this dinner with me. God bless you. And she smiled, and that was it. When he was leaving Sacred Heart, they had a Mass for him, a final Mass for him. The altar server came up to him and said, a woman gave you this card. He didn't think of it because he was getting ready for the Mass. He put it in his jacket. Later that night, he said he took off his jacket and opened up the card. And it was a letter from this woman who said, Father Zubik, you're not going to remember me. But a few years ago, you sat down at McDonald's with me. And she said to him that night, that was going to be her last meal. And she was going to commit suicide and kill her daughter that night. But you showed me kindness that day. You showed me that God loves me. You were a real example of Christ for me. Thank you, Father. And Bishop Zubik tells that story not because of what he did. he said he didn't even really remember much about the conversation, but he remembers her face. And when he said that, I thought about my own life. How many times we encounter people, we have no idea what they're dealing with in their lives. We have no idea their struggles. They may say something to us that ticks us off and we react in a certain way, yet we don't know their struggles. So Bishop Zubik, as a leader here in Pittsburgh, I often think of that McDonald's. When I see the golden arches, I think of that woman and think about how we are all called, like you Vincentians, to be Christ for one another. And in small ways and in large ways, whatever ways we have in our lives, whoever we face in the course of the day. So that's why I bring up Bishop Zubik. I believe he lives the heart of the Vincentian. He carries St. Vincent de Paul with him wherever he goes because he wants to encourage us, like St. Vincent de Paul, to put on Christ for others. On Wednesday of this week, we have these two great women who call us all the time at Channel 4, and they are dedicated to telling us about breaking news. They have scanners at home. So they'll call us and say, Mike, big accident, Rhode Eye Road. There's a fire on Rosedale. And they're wonderful people. Well, these two sisters, Teresa and Diane, lost their sister, Linda. She was very, very sick. And they don't have a lot of material goods in their house. And she called me up and said, Mike, thank God for the Vincentians. And she has no idea I was going to be here today. And I said, why? They said, you know that they care. When nobody else cared, they came to our house. They asked us what we needed. They are going to handle Linda's cremation and her burial. They're picking out everything for us. I didn't know that Vincentians did this. So if anyone helped Teresa and Diane in Verona, I want to thank you on their behalf because you gave them peace. I think that there are no coincidences in life. We can say they're coincidences, but I believe that this was a message that I could give to you today on behalf of Teresa and Diane. A thank you for making their rocky week peaceful by giving them peace that their sister's burial is going to be taken care of. And I think about what you do on a daily basis, going into homes and meeting people. You're not only encouraging other people to live holy lives and bringing people to the joy that is God, but we're all watching you guys. You guys you're not the lead story on our news. You don't brag about what you do on a daily basis, but our friends and neighbors know that what you Vincentians do on a daily basis. So I want to encourage you to keep it up. Father Bob Seaman, who used to be at St. Thomas of Becket, wrote to me once and said, I want you to speak at our Lenten series. I said, Father Bob, I said, I'm an anchor man. I said, I don't do those kinds of things. Mostly priests and nuns do that, right? And he said, no, we pick one lay person to come and speak. And I said, well, you have to give me some guidance. I've never done a Lenten series. If you could help me out. And he said, well, I'll send you the gospel. And it was the Gospel of Mark, chapter 10, about the man, well-appointed man who comes to Jesus and asks him, hey, what can I do? And he knows all the rules and regulations, but he wanted to kick it up a notch. And what did Jesus say to this man he looked like he was well-apportioned, he looked like he was intelligent, he looked like he was faithful. What did Jesus say to this guy? Sell everything and come follow me. So what's this guy's name in the gospel? Don't know, nameless fella, right? I'm a storyteller, so I like to read stories. This guy has no name. How did he respond to Jesus? He walked away from Jesus sad. So we don't know his name. What did this guy do when he went back? Did he say, well, I kind of like what that guy did, so maybe I'll sell half of my stuff and kind of follow him? Did he sell the stuff and follow Jesus? We don't really know. But as I reflected on this and talked to theologians who know a lot more than I know, there are theologians who believe that that gospel exists for us to look at and examine and say, hey, like the Vincentians, maybe this gospel message is that we are all called to be that 13th disciple. This fellow might have been number 13. It might have changed the way of everything we've learned in our lives. He may have had churches named after him. He may have been a pope someday. But we won't know because he's the nameless fellow who walked away from Jesus sad. So when I think about the work that you guys do on a daily basis, the image that I have in my mind of the Vincentians is the very image of Christ. It's the very image of that 13th disciple. being the arms and the hands and the feet and the heart and the face of Jesus to our neighbors who really need that hope, who really need that healing. I think it's spectacular what you guys do. I want you to share the good works that you do, so maybe you can encourage other people, the next generation coming along, that they want to raise their hand and say, hey, put me in, coach. I want to be that 13th disciple. So as we think about how we're going to move, how we're going to allow the Spirit to move us as we leave here today, I want everyone to just join hands, please, and indulge me. And if everyone could close their eyes, and if everyone could think about the next person that you will encounter today, tomorrow, next week. I've always loved the song, Let There Be Peace on Earth. So if we could together sing the second verse of that, I think it's quite appropriate for the mission that we're involved in and the celebration that we're all about today. Let this begin with me. Let this be a moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Ladies and gentlemen, with every step we take away from this place today, whether they be in someone's kitchen, whether they be at McDonald's, whether they be at Heinz Field tonight and everywhere in between, let us take those steps toward peace. Let us walk toward Jesus with hope, with faith, and with healing. May God bless you all, and thank you so much for the honor of being here.